However, if you don't fix what's going on right here, if you don't address your hurts, your resentments, how you show up, your reactions, your behaviors, it's going to show up in your next relationship. You can change the other person, like, "Hey,
Right.
I'm gonna get a new one," but you're still gonna show up with all your dysfunction.
And it's a ticket talking Mazda for the biggest. That's a comma and a comma and a comma. Gotta get it. And it's a ticket talking Mazda for the biggest. That's a comma.
Hi, Alyssa. Nice to see you again.
Oh, it's so good to see you too.
Thank you so much for taking the time to do this interview with me. I'm a fan of your book. I hope everyone who's listening checks it out. But let's get a little bit of your background. So, what led you to become a relationship coach?
Well, I wish I could say it was just like something I always wanted to do, but really it wasn't. My husband and I have been, it's not where I started. My husband and I have been married for 27 years, and I would easily say the first 10 or 11 were really rough. We spent a lot of those years feeling disconnected, not knowing how to talk to one another, not knowing how to interact with one another, having tension around sex, having tension around money, and really found ourselves at a crossroad like at year 11 and realized that we had three options. The kids were 2 and 5 at that time. We could get a divorce and just kind of like rip the band-aid off of all of our dysfunction. We could wait until the baby turned 18. And ironically, she turned 18 about 6 months ago. So we could be in that place where people say, well, I'll just wait till the kids go to college.
Yeah,
Well, we're
my
about there.
parents.
And then we had another option that was, could we get radical and really figure out how to make marriage a priority? And so we went on this deep dive. We did a 60-day sex challenge, which sex was the catalyst, but it was really all of the other things we learned about one another during that 2-month period. And we realized that we hadn't been doing marriage well because we didn't know what we didn't know.
Right.
And that's really what the beginning of that journey was. And we've been podcasting for the last 14 years, have written 9 books, all because we take the time daily to go, okay, how do we encourage, how do we support one marriage?
Well, that's right. There is a lot. And listening to your book, because I listened to the audio version, mom
Yeah.
to a toddler. So that was the easiest way to consume it. It just, so many parts of it spoke to me. And I think a lot of moms will resonate, a lot of married couples, it'll resonate with them because it'll make you feel like, oh, I'm not alone. I'm not, I'm not tripping. I'm not crazy. It made me just feel so normal.
Well, seriously, I thank you for saying that because my heart when I wrote the book, specifically the 6 Pillars of Intimacy that came out in November of 21, was that it would be it would be everything that I would say if I was sitting down across from you. If I was just saying, "Hey, here's where I've been, and here's what I figured out," and you know what? Take these words, apply them to your own marriage, and don't make all the same mistakes that I did. Right. So when
Right.
somebody tells me they read the book and they're like, oh, thank God I'm not alone. And my heart just sings because that's all I've ever wanted is for people to go, I'm not alone and there's something I can do about it.
Exactly, that part. So not only that I'm not alone, but that everything is solvable and you give really straightforward and practical solutions that, that seem so obvious, but then they're not when you're in it.
Well, and like you said, mom of a toddler, your days are consumed with making sure someone's got a clean diaper and making sure snacks and making sure they're not, getting into things and taking things off of shelves and hurting and doing like that's being a mom of a toddler. Mine are now 18 and 21. My parenting challenges look vastly different, but I remember that. And so you get all caught up in, oh my gosh, just stay alive for another 24 hours.
Right,
And you can lose sight of the fact that just like our kids have simple solutions sometimes, so does our marriage.
right.
And that's what I really wanted to, that was my heart in writing the book, was to go, okay, can I equip you with simple tools and strategies? That's why I call them baby steps in the book,
Right.
um, to get into this place where you're like, I can do something. I can, I can affect change in my relationship.
Right. And for women, married couples that are out there, moms, dads, whoever's listening, how would one begin to initiate that conversation? So say one partner is like ready, they read your book and they're like, okay, I'm ready to do this. And then their other one is like, what do we need to fix? Like what? Or maybe
Well,
not even what do we need to fix, but maybe it's more resistant to change.
it's interesting that you bring this up because just yesterday I was in a coaching session and was talking to one couple where the wife was really like gung ho. She's the one reading all the books, listening to all the podcasts, doing all the things. And her husband's like, yeah, so I'm here. And that's the dynamic. And I see that dynamic a lot in coaching couples. And it's part of the reason why not only do I have baby steps in the book, but there's a section in every one of the 6 chapters around the pillars of intimacy that starts with what can I do?
Right.
And a lot of times in a relationship, when there is some resistance, it's not going to come in our words. It's not going to come with saying, hey, I want you to read this book or I read this book on marriage, because the more resistant spouse is going to be like, we're good. I'm good. I don't have time. I'm not broken. You want to fix something, you fix it yourself.
Right.
Any one of those phrases, I've heard them, I've said them, that kind of thing. And so if we take a step back and say, you know what, I'm going to change the environment. I'm going to take action and start to just do the little things, right? If it's emotional intimacy, I'm going to start like sharing my feelings. I'm going to start creating a space where maybe I don't interrupt you when you're talking and I'm just going to sit here and listen and you're just go, why haven't you interrupted me?
Right.
What's that about? Or if it's physical intimacy, which is the non-sexual touch, that I'm just going to start touching my spouse again, like those little loving touches. I'm just going to do it. I'm not going to make a big production about it. I'm not going to
Right.
say, you do this too. I'm going to see what happens. I mean, we know it with our kids, right? We know if we change the environment that they're in, they will respond differently. Our spouses really aren't that different. I'm not saying our spouses
Yeah.
are kids. I'm just saying they respond to a different environment.
Yeah.
And whoever's listening, you have the opportunity to change the environment within your relationship.
And I like that tone of the book. You really do focus on, I think of that quote, be the change you want to see in the world. So it's like, be the change you want to see in the relationship.
100%. 100%.
Yes, I really like that. And also your transparency. Everything you say seems so like authentic, like the part where you're talking about like how it's this is where I am now, where sometimes you just feel like I resonated with so many of your feelings. I feel like, you're like overstimulated and at the end
Yeah.
of the day and you just like want to be alone.
And I think that's so needed today in the books that are being written, in the podcasts that are being produced. So much of what we see is crafted, right? Whether it's the perfect Instagram image of a great family that, I don't know, somehow mom got all the kids like in clean clothes and looking at
Right.
the camera at the same. Like, I'm still amazed at that because I've got an 18 and a 21-year-old. We just took family pictures and I had to scroll through a bunch of pictures from the photographer to go, okay, which one does, like, where are everybody's eyes open?
Right.
Like, nobody shows
How
me all
do
the
they
pictures.
do that? Is it right?
Right. And so we live in a society that is so curated. And the truth of the matter is that Tony and I committed in episode 4 of our podcast, and we've now recorded 804 episodes, so like 800 episodes ago, that we would always be open, honest, and transparent. And no matter if it's a course, if it's a live event, if it's a book, if it's a podcast, that is our heart, that we're not going to tell you we're perfect. I'm not going to tell you that I've got it all figured out. I'm a few steps ahead. I've done it a few more hundreds of times.
Right.
So I can give you guidance and wisdom on that, but I'm not perfect. And it's important that my readers know,
Right.
look, Alisa still gets mad at her husband. Alisa still yells at her kids. Like, these things happen.
Yeah, we're human. Wow, I
Mhm.
love that. And do you see something that's maybe a little bit different from your coaching experience, the dynamic of like specifically moms who are also working full time and moms compared to like moms that are maybe they don't have or maybe just couples that don't have children because I feel like the children part changes the whole dynamic. Me and my husband we say we were married because we were married like 5 years before we had our son and then there was marriage. I feel like it wasn't even really marriage before we had our son. And then I feel like we got married again. It was like a whole different relationship after we had our son. So you can
Oh,
speak a little bit to that transition and that big shift.
kids change everything. Your story is similar to ours. We waited 6 years to have our son Alex, and like the before Alex and the after Alex, like night and day. Because when you introduce a little human being who is completely dependent on you, you see a whole nother side of yourself and a whole nother side of your spouse that you didn't know was there. Especially this is like the whole first child syndrome, right? Where you're
Right.
like, where did you come from? Not just the child, but like I was telling somebody the other day, I still remember bringing Alex home from the hospital and looking at him in his car seat carrier and looking at Tony and literally uttering the words, why was this a good idea? And who's trusting us to keep this, like, how are we responsible enough to keep him alive? I was 28. I'm not, I'm not equipped to do this. Right?
Right? That was
He's
exactly
now
us.
21.
I felt like, why would they trust us to take a baby home? We had the same conversation, and I was 30. I was 33. I was like, I felt like I was 16 and pregnant, but I was a grown woman.
It's a thing.
Right.
Like, it seems like a really good idea to have a baby, and then you do, and then you're like, "Oh my gosh." And no, like, no book, no, you know,
Right. I
no
read all
website,
the books and everything, and then you actually have the little human there. You're like, wow.
right? And so you do have to rediscover
Mhm.
your marriage after having a baby. And when you're working too, there's a whole different dynamic to that because it's not just like we're all working moms. Let me just put that up there because
Right.
keeping a house, raising a family, everybody's working. If you have a job or run a company on top of that, there are added pressures and responsibilities and learning how to navigate that within yourself. Like, what am I going to say yes to? What am I going to say no to? Because if you say yes to everything, burnout is real. It will happen.
Right.
Um, and how do you still maintain the marriage relationship as well? Because as a wife, I know my husband early years of having Alex and Abby, who came along 3 years later, he would utter phrases like, "You needed me to make them. It'd be nice to be needed on the back end too." Like, not just another hand to change diapers. Like, could you show me that you love me?
Right.
And
And
it's because it's so easy as a mom to kind of lose, like, get all wrapped up in, oh, they need a diaper
right.
change, they need food, and forget that there's this other adult in the house that needs us to look up from the kids and look at him and say, I see you too.
Yes, that's so true. And one of my best friends, a male friend, they had him and his wife. They had their baby around like literally a month before we had our son, and he
Okay.
was kind of expressing the same thing to me. And then I was like, "Oh my gosh!" And I understand. I resonated so much with like like his wife, and I'm like, "Oh my gosh, he's telling me this."
Mhm.
And, like, they also went to, like, some couples coaching. I'm like, "Wow, am I, like, paying enough attention to my husband?" It's like he and then it just was like this aha moment I had. I'm like and then we spoke about it, and it's true. I think I was just so focused on, like, "Okay, how do I be a mom? How do I, like, focus on
Mhm.
this baby?" And then I'm like, "Wait, do am I, like, paying attention to you?" And vice versa, because I also felt like I'm just doing all this and like I wasn't, my emotions weren't I'm like worried about everyone else's, emotions, but mine aren't being met as well, like or tended
Right.
to. So, yeah, it's like it's funny when like something makes you like realize, "Oh, wait, there's a
Well, and it's not something that's talked about very much because, like you said, we're so prone to keeping all those emotions inside, right? Like I'll get through it. I've got to be a great mom. And like I've got to get these things done. And so we just keep boxing things up instead of like you were saying, hey, am I doing okay by you? Like,
right,
am I am I seeing you? Am I checking in with you? Because sometimes just that simple question is enough to bridge between a husband and a wife. It's enough to say, okay, I do see you. I might have been a little wrapped up in this, but let me just stop for a second, look up and go, oh, you're there.
yeah, exactly.
And I still like
Just
you. So
acknowledge,
let's
right? I remember when we went on a date night after like ages that and then we were like at the end of the day we're like, well, we still like each other. Yeah, they were just like preoccupied and stressed all the time.
well, and that's one of the things that I don't think gets talked about often enough is what is that stress and what does it look like? And my kids are much older than yours, so I will tell you that the stresses will look different at different ages and stages.
They won't
Um,
disappear.
they don't disappear. You don't have the immediate like keep them alive stress that you do when you first bring them home from the hospital, but when they're teenagers and they've got their driver's license and they're
Whoa.
like it's a different keep them alive. Um, but it's such a motherhood's such a beautiful journey
It is.
when we are willing, especially when we're willing to open our mouths and say, "Hey, I'm not doing so great here," or "I need help." or I don't know what
Yes.
these emotions are, but I'm feeling something and I need to include you so that I don't stuff it and then turn out to be this like raging crazy woman. You're like, what's going on with you? But instead loop our spouses into that place.
Yes, that's so true. I feel like a lot of women, we have this pressure to be to know, like we're supposed to know how to do this, and all the women, like every mom did this, so we should be able to do it too. And I think I was just so resistant to ask for help in the beginning until I was like, I felt like a hypocrite because I'm a dietitian, a nutritionist, and I was always like preaching like health and wellness and telling, this was before I was a mom. I was telling my clients that were mothers, you need to like prioritize your health. You're the mom. And then there I was for the first time in their position. I was like, oh my gosh, like now I get it. It's so much easier said than done. So I had to like snap out of it. And the first thing I did was just express to my husband and to like my family, I need help. And then that just expressing that, we're like, oh, then why didn't you like people, you just assume people can figure it out like, oh, wow, she's doing great. But yeah, it's something as simple, like you said, is communicating that.
Mhm, mhm. And people are willing, right?
Yeah.
You find with your husband or your family, and I think it's this big myth that and I'm about to be 50. It's still like I think all throughout our lives as women, it's a challenge that we face. Is like, who are those people that you can ask for help? Who do you keep close to you? Those close dear friends that you're like, I know that you are in my circle. I had a situation come up yesterday. And I was like, okay, who do I need in this place? And I picked up a single girlfriend and I just said, you are the exact right person that I need to talk to. And she's like, I'm yours. Like, what do you want to talk about? And we dug into it. She was there for me. I left the conversation feeling amazing, but it was because I didn't keep internalizing it
Yeah, that's
and
beautiful.
thinking it over and over and over and over and over and over.
That's a big tip too for all the women out there. Have that, you don't have to keep it bottled in. It's okay to vent and
Mhm.
share and alleviate that, whatever's you're keeping in there. It's healthier too.
Well, and I'm part of a women's mastermind. And I remember one of our very first sessions in it, um, the gal who was leading that day, she said, we're going to do this exercise. And it was this exercise of just sharing like 2 minutes. Every woman had 2 minutes just to kind of share everything that she was frustrated with or feeling burdened by. And she prefaced the exercise by saying, when you share it with us, we're not taking on your burden, but we are lightening your load. And I thought, oh my gosh. And it was kind of like, you kind of have to wrap your mind around that concept that you're not burdening somebody, but when you give it to another woman to share with you, you're actually feeling lighter.
Yeah. And that's the thing that's hard for me because I'm always somebody, I try to like pride myself of being able to do things, and I'm always like hesitant to ask for help. But then I just got to the point where I was like, if I want to show up like I'm supposed to, and I can't do it all. Like I'm not superwoman, and yeah, and people were like, yeah, of course, like, and I'm like, why didn't I ask for help before?
Right.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
So I want people to check out the book. I don't want you to give too much away,
Okay.
but in a nutshell, could you tell the couples out there what they could expect, what kind of solutions they can expect from your book?
Absolutely. So the title of the book, like I mentioned earlier, is The Six Pillars of Intimacy, The Secret to an Extraordinary Marriage. And I wrote this book because one of the struggles that Tony and I had early in our marriage was this idea of wanting closeness and connection, wanting intimacy, but we'd use the word intimacy, except for the fact that the world has so distorted that word that it's
Yeah.
almost always synonymous with sex. And so like it was this huge tension in our marriage. And as we've spent the last, 10, 14 years studying marriage, we got into this place where we're like, okay, first of all, you can't have sex 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. Physically impossible. So how else can you be close and connected in your relationship? And that's where the six pillars came from. It's emotional intimacy. So that's all your communication. It's your verbal, your nonverbal, your body language. It's that sharing of thoughts, feelings, and desires. And so I identify that as the workhorse because if you can't talk about things, you can't even get to the other five pillars. Right. And so there are strategies to help you build that for each one of the pillars. The second pillar is physical intimacy. And I very specifically separate physical
Yes,
intimacy
I
as
like how you differentiate that. Yeah.
yeah, non-sexual touch versus sexual intimacy, which is everything involved with like it's out, sexual intimacy. But the reason for separating that out was the fact that there are a lot of touches that we can give one another that don't have to lead to sex, and they're just as important to that feeling connected. It's the kiss as you're like walking out the door. It's the hug at the end of a long, hard day. It's sitting next to each other on a couch and just holding hands. It's saying, "Hey, I see you and
Right.
you're important. I'm just going to touch you." Um, the next pillar is financial intimacy. And so
Yes, that's a good
equip-
one.
it is a good one. It's equipping couples to be able to have language around their finances, to be able to talk about everything from, a budget or a cash flow plan all the way through retirement and estate planning. And it's recognizing that whether you have joint or separate accounts, money is a factor in your marriage. And so developing the skills with these strategies to be able to talk about it strengthens your relationship.
It does, and I feel like people are afraid to talk about that even in marriages.
Oh,
Like,
it's awful.
yes, it's like, I don't know, not romantic, but I'm like, it's so important, it's practical. What are you gonna do with that money? And also, that's one of the main reasons for divorce. Am I right?
Absolutely. Yeah. Finances generally falls in one of the top three reasons why couples get divorced, depending on what study you look at. And you're right, it's not sexy. It's not a sexy topic. But when a couple has strength in their financial intimacy pillar, they're so much better able to handle different stressors that come at them because they've got this shared language around money, around their finances. The fourth pillar is spiritual intimacy. And this is equipping couples to, again, kind of like financial intimacy, where a lot of couples don't talk about it because it's like, hey, this is just something I'm supposed to focus on. Spiritual intimacy is very similar.
Mhm.
And so looking at how the two of you create closeness and connection with your shared faith practices, being able to talk about your faith. What does that look like in our marriage and raising our children and all of those different aspects, but being able to do that within that spiritual intimacy pillar.
And that's something that's so important, especially if you're like me and my husband, that we come from two different cultures, two different religions, countries, everything. And that was something that we didn't think so much about when we had our son. And then we had our son, and we're like, I'm like, oh, wait, do you want me to do your holidays like Orthodox Christmas? I'm gonna do Pesach, like Passover. It was just like a thing. And like some things are less important to him, but they are more important to me. So I think that's so important. Like people who are in like new relationships, they really need to read this.
Well, and I appreciate you saying that because we do have a lot of folks who listen to the podcast, read the books, who are not married, but love learning about the six pillars because, like, I didn't even know you were supposed to talk about this.
Right,
And please do. Please talk about, the fact that we're coming from different cultures and different faith backgrounds. And what are we going to do with our kids?
right.
Because for some couples, that can really become a huge source of tension.
Yeah,
And it's like, what do we do? But if you have the conversations early, then you've got the opportunity to have more repetitions of that to say, okay, now that we're considering this, what does that look like for you? Is it important? Because like you said, for both of you, for you, this might be more important. For him, this might be more important. Okay, well, let's talk about how we're going to make both of those things happen.
right. And it's so funny because I feel like preserving his traditions, it's important to me too. But I'm like, but we should also do this so he knows. Like it's so such a funny dynamic, but and it's something that I didn't even think about until we had we had a child, and we're like, because we're like, I want to create like traditions for him and
Right?
things to look forward to. And I'm like, okay, we have two sets of holidays, the more the merrier.
Like we're celebrating all year long. It's just
Right.
there's always something going on. Always, and and that can be really incredible within the family too, especially as you and your husband. And this is why we talk about the six pillars as a framework, because it gives the two of you language to
Right.
talk about it. But then as you are raising the next generation, it also gives them language. Here's why these things are, mom and dad have had the conversations, and here's why we feel this is important. And now we can tell you instead of, for a lot of couples that don't have these conversations, then it's like, well, we're just going to do it this way. But why? Because I
Right.
said so. That doesn't really help anybody. And so if you recognize that it's a way to be intimate with your spouse, now it's like, oh, let's work on this together and let's build something that's really going to be extraordinary for our marriage. So I talk about that in the spiritual intimacy pillar. Pillar number 5 is recreational intimacy. And as Tony says, this is the fun pillar, right? It's
Right.
what do you guys like to do together? And I would say, you even mentioned going on that date night after months and months. For moms, for parents of young children, it's easy to forget the fun because you're so wrapped up in their lives.
Right.
You and your spouse had fun before baby came. It's what kept you like interacting with one another. It was creating memories. It was, just like knitting the two of you together. And so you don't want to lose that for all the childbearing years. You might have to change the things you do, kind of like we were talking about, like pre-kid, post-kid,
Yeah.
but you can still have fun. And in fact, I would say it's actually more important for mom and dad to have fun after the children come along than it was beforehand, because it sets the example for your kids that the marriage relationship is so important.
Right.
Kids need to know that. They need to know that their parents are working on their marriage because it gives them a sense of security that, the divorce statistic is what it is. Kids worry because they see so much divorce.
Mm.
And
Yeah, and
so,
I like you mentioned in the beginning of your book how a lot of our behaviors are because of the examples we saw from our parents, and that also made me like more aware. And I'm like, wow, that's so true because my parents weren't that like touchy feely or affectionate.
Mhm.
So I think I'm just naturally not that person. I have to be conscious, like I have to do it
Yeah.
consciously, and I kind of resonated a lot with what you were saying. And then my husband's the opposite, so and I was like, oh yeah, that's true because his parents are like that. Like yeah, so just doing it and being intentional, and it's okay if you have to think about it and remind yourself.
Well, because I think anything that's important, like as we're building our marriages, as we're developing these relationships, there are going to be things that aren't as natural to us as it is to our spouse,
Mm.
but it's important to them. And
Right,
so we have to step out of that place and say, well, just because it's not natural to me doesn't mean I can't do it.
right,
It just means I'm going to have to put a little bit more mental energy and maybe physical energy into the expression of that. But here's the beauty of it. Your husband, like mine, knows that we're not the most touchy-feely. So when we do it and they know we're making that really conscious effort to do it, it means so much to them because they know that we're stepping into their world to connect. And
right.
that's a powerful place.
And it's funny because I did become that person because of him, and I even like embraced it. But then it's like after I had my kid and I got busy, I kind of went back into like my old habits, and then I had
Mhm.
to become more intentional all over again and think about it and be conscious about it. Yeah.
We do it. We all do it in different seasons. And it's even cultivating and again, coming back to the emotional intimacy, it's cultivating the emotional intimacy within the marriage that if you have kind of slipped back into this place where you're not, and I've done this in many different pillars, where it's safe for him to say something in a way that's not harsh, like, oh my gosh, Cerise, you haven't touched me. And you're just like, whoa, I'm not touching you now, anyhow. But instead to be like, hey, honey, it's like, I know you've been so wrapped up in taking care of our child. It just feels like it's been a little while. Could we
Right.
could we both get more intentional about, these areas of our marriage? And now it's the shared, we're doing this as a team. It's not just pointing fingers at you saying, hey, you need to do this. It's like, hey, like I've noticed this. I would love to have more of, the hugs or the kisses or whatever it might be. Where else can I meet your needs? Right. And so now it's a give and take. It's not just you have to do something for me, but rather we're a team. How do we elevate both?
Yeah. I like, and you mentioned that in the book, like where it's like your most important team sport, the biggest team sport.
It is because how we represent marriage, not just to our spouse, but to our children and to our communities, makes a huge difference. And if we can stay on the same team, if we can recognize that we're working together to build these pillars, if we can recognize that problems are outside of us, the spouse is not the problem is the problem, then we can stay in alignment and become those marriages, have those relationships where people are like, what's your secret? Why do you guys look like you still like each other? Why do you like, how did that happen? Because our world is so used to seeing people that just kind of do the roommate thing really, really well.
Yeah, the roommate thing or divorce. Like I feel like we, my friend group at least, we've only been married like nobody's married more than like 10 years, but there are already divorces happening, and People, I don't like, I feel like people give up so easily nowadays. I'm sure, like, there, of course, there are reasons that merit divorce, but just like the example like you were giving me in the beginning, like, just for things that are like communication issues, a lot of times that can be fixed.
Well, and I think that epidemic has gotten worse. I don't have the statistics to back it up. I just know what I hear. I've been a marriage coach for the last 10 years. Um, I think it's very easy to go, well, you know what? There's more options out there.
Especially
And
with social media and everything. They're like,
yes,
"Oh, I'll just swipe and get another."
swipe and get another. And instead of saying, you know what, that could that could be true. However, if you don't fix what's going on right here, if you don't address your hurts, your resentments, how you show up, your reactions, your behaviors, it's going to show up in your next relationship. You can change the other person, like, hey,
Right,
I'm going to get a new one, but you're still going to show up with all your dysfunction. So why not? Like I tell people all the time, like, why not learn how to communicate? Why not learn how to uh, discuss and address needs in any of the six pillars? Why not do that now and see if this isn't salvageable? Because at one point in time, this person that you're now fighting with was your everything.
right.
You were willing to stand up in front of God, family, and friends and say, I'm committing my life to this person. So can you commit yourself to at least trying and giving 100% to solve the problems? And if the problems can't be solved, then I understand that. But most couples give up before they know that they've tried everything.
And it's so funny, like, I know I have, like, aunties and, older friends that have been through divorce, and they all say the same thing, like, they coulda solved it with their first partner, like, and they only realized that later. And because it's like you said, like, a lot of times you don't wanna see what you contributed to that dysfunction, you just blame the other person and say, "Okay, I'll just get another person," but you're still that same person, and I'm all
Well,
for
and
that, yeah. Changing,
that,
being the change, like you said.
absolutely. Because that piece of wisdom that you just gave there, that you've talked to people who have been divorced and they're like, I could have done something. I think it goes back to even earlier in this conversation, so when you were talking about the fact that, here you are, new mom, not asking for help, right? Because I should know how to do this thing called motherhood. I think there are a lot of us that have that same mentality when it comes to marriage. I should like Hollywood. Like they make it look so easy. I should be able to be married for 50 years and not have to ask for help, right? It should just be easy. Well, you're so different than your spouse. And the world and life are going to throw all kinds of things at you. So if you need help because you can't fix it on your own, get help. Don't get divorced first, get help first and see if the challenges aren't fixable.
Right. And do you find that people wait too late to get help? Or is it always salvageable if they get help?
Well, the Gottman Institute has a statistic that says that the average couple waits 6 to 7 years to get help, which is a really long time. It's not always salvageable
Mm.
because some couples do wait too long. Um, I like to tell people, I'm like, the minute it starts to feel uncomfortable, get help because there's probably a whole lot more going on at that point in
Right.
time. But if you are like, oh, we can fix this by ourselves, or we'll just wait till the kids are, they're not toddlers, they're in school, or we'll just wait till they're out of school. Like you can keep kicking the can and just saying, well, it'll get better when, instead of saying, you know what, it's okay. I don't have the skills or the tools that I need to fix this. I'm just going to get those. We're not irreparably broken. We just need more tools. It's kind of like, Seriously, you mentioned being a dietitian.
Right. That's what I was thinking now. Like I was thinking about preventative medicine, like you don't want to wait till you have diabetes and then start treating it. You want to prevent diabetes, right?
It's the same thing. So you would take those preventative steps. You would, exercise and nutrition and do all of the things so that your body isn't falling apart.
Right.
Well, take all the preventative measures to, you know, get the communication skills, learn about finances with your spouse, make dates a priority, have sex, like do all of those things so that your relationship doesn't fall apart. Right? It's the same strategy. It just we're applying it to a different topic.
And you mentioned the sex challenge also in the book. Is that really every day?
So when Tony and I, so for the listeners that are maybe you heard me say that at the beginning and now it's coming back. Yes, Tony and I embarked on a 60-day sex challenge. We ended up completing 40 out of 60 days, so in a 2-month period because, like, with me getting my period, he
Yeah,
has
that's what I was thinking about. Like sometimes you just don't want to.
so the intent had been to do our best to have sex every day for 60 days. We did, even at the outset, make an exception for me having my period because I was just like, I'm not good with that. That doesn't make me feel comfortable. Anything.
Right.
We also said that if anybody was sick, Tony
Mhm.
actually ended up at the hospital with a viral migraine. He was in
Oh,
the urgent care. And then if somebody was traveling, we're like, we're not in the same place. So we completed 40 out of 60.
that's
Uh,
impressive.
well, I wish I could I wish I could, like, I used to think that was very impressive, but we have couples in our audience. We call them the one family series. Some of these couples have had sex, or let me actually rephrase that. They've been sexually intimate. And this is one of the things I didn't say about the sexual intimacy pillar is that it's not just intercourse,
Right.
right? It's defining of foreplay, initiating romance, what that all means to you so that the two of you can get more yeses than nos, right? More ways to connect than just, I want to have sex or I don't want to have sex.
Right.
So there are couples in the one family who, over the course of a year, will easily get into like between 150 and 250 times of being sexually intimate in a year.
Whoa. That's an
It,
extraordinary family.
that's an extraordinary couple, absolutely. But what it boils down to is they figured out a way that makes sense for their marriage to keep the sexual intimacy pillar strong. I don't say that because everybody should do it. Tony and I haven't done it. Like, I'm like, high five to all those couples. Um, but at its heart, it's not about the number. It's about saying, okay, what's going to work for our marriage, for the sexual intimacy pillar to connect that way, to be strong. And then figuring out what that is for the two of you.
Mhm. Love that. And last question, do you have any words for advice? Because we talked about, a lot about the couple and that's your expertise. But what about just the mom? Because I
Mhm.
feel like sometimes we neglect our self-care, not some, oftentimes we neglect our self-care, not just with young children. I know like older moms, moms to older children as well. So how do you prioritize your self-care within your marriage? And you have a podcast and a business and all of that. So tell us a bit about that.
What I will say to all the moms listening is, and it's something they say about, children, do not neglect small beginnings. And wherever you're at in whatever stage of motherhood, even finding 5 minutes a day that you claim as your own. I know you're like, oh, but at least it's just 5 minutes. I'm like, no, it
No,
is
that
5 minutes. Set a timer, tell your husband, tell your kids, or get it while they're napping, right? But just say, I'm not going to do the laundry. I'm not going to answer emails. I'm just going to, what, little Marie Kondo, what sparks joy? Right? What are those things? If you want to sit down and just, I will walk outside on a busy coaching day and I'll get like 10 minutes just to have the sun on my face because I work in my office and just breathe deeply outside. For me now, again, my kids are older. I make walking a priority. I take a long walk. I try and get my 10,000 steps every day because I need to move my body and I need to breathe fresh air. If you're in a season, I know you mentioned listening to the book. If you're in a season where you can't read a book because somebody, like, just stick your AirPods in and listen. Paint
right.
your toenails. Have a cup of tea. Say this is time for me. And when I take this time for me, I will be a better mom and a better wife.
Exactly. Yeah, that's what I told when I finally picked myself back together and started asking for help and prioritizing my self-care. I just said, okay, because I had like this routine before I became a mom. And I said,
Mhm.
okay, that was in the past. I can't have that right now. Maybe I will in the future. But now I have to do something that's realistic. And like you said, I always take it back to nutrition and everything. But
Yeah.
that was the same thing I would tell my clients. They have like this all or nothing mentality. Oh, well, I can't, I'll start next month because I ate like too. And I'm like, no, it's okay. Like, it's fine. Even if you
Start
go outside and you take a 5 minute walk, I would literally say, go 5 minutes, walk. And they'll say, but 5 minutes, it's nothing. I'm like, no, it's something. And so the same with, so I applied that to myself with like self-care. And I even have something I call like mindful moments because the thought of even doing like a meditation is daunting to me. I'm like, I cannot sit and do not do anything for 30 minutes, but just 5 minutes, I'll just stretch across my bed and listen to like a 3-5 minute guided something, or just say some affirmation, or just stare. It gives me a reset. It's so funny how just like getting like 5-10 minutes to myself, a long shower, a walk.
Mm.
Yeah, it's a world of a difference now.
Well, we know how important it is for our kids. Like I would say to all the moms listening, like, when your kids have reached their limit. You can see it, whether it's a tantrum or they fall asleep,
Right.
or it's just like you can tell when they're so overstimulated. And I wish that we were different as grown-ups. We're not. We're not like, we might contain it a little bit better, but we
Right.
still throw the tantrums. We still get irritated. And so if we can recognize giving that space to our kids, right? And saying, hey, we're just gonna have a little quiet time now. I used to tell my kids all the time when I was just like too much. I'm like, it's time for quiet time. Let's do it for ourselves as women, as wives, as mothers, and say, I need a little quiet time because I want to show up in my best, most authentic self. It's a gift to your family when you do.
It is, and that's how I had to look at it, and I hope every mom out there looks at it like that, because I'm like, I'm important to the family. I'm like the force behind everything that gets done, so I need to
Absolutely.
take care of myself and not sacrifice, like, my well-being to make sure everybody else is okay. And then I realized when I was prioritizing that, then everybody benefited. So,
You
yeah.
got it. You absolutely got it.
Wow. So thank you so much. Tell people where they can find you, where they can purchase your book, listen to your podcast.
Yeah, everything comes back to oneextraordinarymarriage.com. That is where you can find all about us. That is our website. We're on Instagram at One Extraordinary Marriage. The book is at Amazon, sixpillarsofintimacy.com. You can just go straight there to get the book. But, everything that we do comes back to One Extraordinary Marriage. And
Awesome.
so they'll be able to find everything they need there.
And I'll link it also in the show notes.
Yeah.
Thank you so much, Alisa. If you want an extraordinary marriage, check out her podcast, her book, everything. I'm going to implement a lot of things that I've read in your book. And yeah, I'm not going to just throw the book at my husband, like read it like you said.
Thank you.
I'm going to start with being the change and then baby step, even though he's usually open to things like this. So I don't think I'll have a problem there, luckily. But yeah,
I
thank
love
you.
it. Well, I'm honored. I'm honored to have been here today. Thank you.
I'm honored. I hope we can talk again in the future.
Definitely.
Thank you so much for tuning in to Maternity Leave. I hope you found value in this episode. Your support means the world. By subscribing, leaving a comment, and sharing this episode with another mom entrepreneur, you'll help it grow and reach more incredible guests who can share their insights and guidance. Until next time, take care, love on your loved ones, and make it happen. You got this.
And it's a ticket talking Mazda for the biggest. That's a comma and a comma and a comma. Gotta get it, get it. And it's a ticket talking Mazda for the biggest. That's a comma and a comma and a comma. Gotta get it.